Jake Daniels was only 10 years old, but the weight of the world already rested heavily on his small shoulders. He had a contagious laugh that could light up any room and a smile that melted hearts. But Jake wasn't like the other kids his age. He wasn't worried about schoolwork or sports. His worries were much heavier, more profound. Jake was dying. Diagnosed with an aggressive form of leukemia, doctors had told him and his family there was no more treatment. Time was running out. He spent his days in a sterile hospital room, watching the world go by outside his window, counting down the days that seemed to stretch on forever. He had one wish left, one final desire before he would have to say goodbye. But it wasn't a wish for toys or a big party. No, Jake's wish was simple, yet impossible for most kids to even dream of. He wanted to meet Keanu Reeves. It wasn't just because he loved the actor's action-packed roles in movies like The Matrix or John Wick. It wasn't even because Keanu was a household name. It was because to Jake, Keanu represented something more: kindness. Jake had seen countless interviews where Keanu seemed like the kind of person who genuinely cared about others. He wasn't like most Hollywood stars. He was humble, grounded, and seemed to have a kind heart. For Jake, Keanu was a symbol of hope. In a world that felt so dark, Jake's parents, though heartbroken, had accepted the harsh reality. His mother, Sarah, stayed by his side every moment, holding his hand as he fought battles he didn't understand. His father, Mark, tried to maintain hope, but even he knew the inevitable was coming. It was a rainy afternoon when Jake's wish made its way onto the internet. Sarah, in a moment of desperation and love for her son, recorded a short video of Jake talking about his dream. "Hi, my name's Jake," the video began, his small voice cracking with a mix of excitement and sadness. "I know I don't have much time left, but if there's one thing I want before I go, it's to meet Keanu Reeves. I've watched every movie he's in, and he's my hero. If you're out there, Mr. Reeves, please help me make this wish come true." Sarah posted the video online, not knowing if it would reach anyone, but hoping, just hoping that somehow, some way, the right person would see it. The next morning, the video went viral. Thousands of people shared it. Celebrities, doctors, and everyday people alike posted messages of support. "Let's make this boy's dream come true," they said. The hashtag #KeanuMakeJakesWishComeTrue trended for days. People around the world from every corner of the globe began to rally for Jake. But even with all the buzz, the question remained, would Keanu Reeves see this video? Would he care enough to make Jake's last wish come true? Jake had no idea that his simple wish would cause such a whirlwind. He didn't even know what viral meant. But Sarah, sitting beside him in his hospital room, kept watching as the notifications rolled in. Her phone rang. It was a number she didn't recognize. "Hello?" She answered, her voice hopeful yet unsure. "Hi, is this Sarah Daniels? This is Grace from Keanu's team," the voice on the other end said. "We've seen Jake's video and Keanu wants to meet him." At that moment, everything in the world seemed to stop. Sarah couldn't believe her ears. Keanu Reeves, the man Jake had idolized for years, the man who had unknowingly been a beacon of hope for her son, was actually going to make his dream come true. It was happening. "Mom," Jake called from his bed, excitement bubbling in his voice. "What did they say? Did they see my video?" Sarah wiped away a tear before answering, her voice shaky but filled with overwhelming joy. "Jake, Keanu is coming. He's going to meet you." Jake's face lit up like a Christmas tree. For the first time in weeks, he didn't feel sick, he didn't feel afraid. All he could feel was the rush of excitement, the possibility that he would meet the man who had inspired him to keep fighting. "Really? Keanu's coming?" Jake whispered, a look of disbelief still on his face. "Yes, baby," Sarah whispered, back her heart full. Really, it was surreal. But as the news spread, so did a new hope. Jake's dream wasn't just something that belonged to him anymore. It had become a collective wish shared by thousands of strangers. Everyone wanted to see this boy's smile, to witness the impossible becoming possible. And for the first time in what felt like forever, Jake had hope again. He wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. He was fighting to meet his hero, to live long enough to see that impossible wish come true. Jake had always been a curious and adventurous boy, the kind who never backed down from a challenge no matter how big or small. He had a natural optimism, always trying to look at the bright side of things, even as his world shrank in size with each passing day. But for all his courage, there were moments when the weight of his illness became too much. It was in those quiet, lonely hours, when he couldn't escape the sterile smell of the hospital or the incessant beeping of machines, that he thought about how much he wished for things to be different. He wasn't afraid of dying. That part didn't scare him. It was the thought of leaving behind his family, especially his mom and dad, that filled him with sadness. He often found himself wondering if they would be okay without him, if they would remember him, or if his life would be reduced to just a memory, forgotten with time. But then there was Keanu Reeves. Keanu wasn't just a movie star to Jake. To him, Keanu was a symbol of kindness. Jake had read stories about the actor's quiet generosity, how he had given away most of his earnings from The Matrix to the crew, how he spent his free time supporting charity events without seeking attention. Jake admired his humility, and Keanu's actions, far more than his roles on the big screen, had inspired him to be brave in the face of his own battle. It wasn't the fame or fortune Jake admired. It was how Keanu made the world feel like a better place. And for a kid who spent most of his days inside a hospital room, that hope was something worth clinging to. So when Jake's mom posted the video, it wasn't just an attempt to get his favorite actor's attention, it was his last act of hope. He needed to believe that the kindness he saw in Keanu could be real, and maybe, just maybe, Keanu's generosity could help him find peace before his time ran out. The days following the video's release were a blur. Jake's world, which had seemed so small and constrained, suddenly felt alive with excitement. News outlets started picking up the story, and even celebrities began sharing the video. Some people posted messages of support, encouraging Jake to hang on and keep fighting. Others commented on the video, telling Jake how strong he was. But it was when Jake's mom got that phone call, the call from Keanu's team, that things really began to change. Sarah could hardly believe it when she heard the words, "Keanu wants to meet Jake." The anticipation was almost unbearable for Jake. Every day he waited for the moment when the man he had idolized for so long would walk into his hospital room. The idea that Keanu Reeves, the man from the big screen, would actually come to visit him seemed almost too good to be true. But Sarah assured him that it was real, and Keanu's team was making all the arrangements. Jake's mind raced. What would he say to Keanu? What could he possibly say to someone who had been such an important part of his life, even if they'd never met? "I can't believe it," Jake whispered to his mom one afternoon as he lay back in his hospital bed staring up at the ceiling. "It's like a dream." Sarah smiled at her son, brushing a stray lock of hair from his forehead. "It's not a dream, Jake, it's happening. And when he gets here, you'll have the chance to tell him everything you've always wanted." But as the days passed, Jake began to feel the weight of his illness more intensely. The medications made him feel sluggish and his energy was fading. His thoughts became cloudy, and even though he was excited, he felt a wave of fear wash over him. What if Keanu didn't come in time? What if he wasn't strong enough to even meet his hero? There was a moment of quiet before he spoke again, his voice barely a whisper. "Mom, do you think I'll get to tell him everything? All the stuff I wanted to say?" Sarah's heart clenched as she held her son's hand tightly. "You will, sweetheart. You'll have the chance to tell him how much he's meant to you, and he'll know. I know he will." It wasn't long before the day arrived. Sarah got a call from Keanu's team with the final details. Keanu was flying in, and he would be at the hospital the very next day. The excitement in Jake's eyes was uncontainable, but it was also bittersweet. The reality of his situation began to settle in as he tried to process the whirlwind of emotions he was feeling. He wanted to be strong, to hold on for just a little longer. But deep down he knew that this moment was perhaps the most important of his life, and he was determined to make it count. As the sun began to set that evening, Sarah looked at her son, who was already lying in bed, staring out the window. He seemed lost in thought, his face a mixture of hope and fear. "Jake," she said softly, "I know this is a big moment for you, But no matter what happens tomorrow, I want you to remember something." Jake turned to face her, his big blue eyes full of curiosity. "You're already a hero," she continued, her voice thick with emotion. "You've shown more strength than anyone I know, and no matter what happens, nothing can take that away." Jake smiled faintly. "Thanks, Mom. But I think meeting Keanu will make me feel like a hero, too." The next morning came quickly, and with it a mix of nervous excitement. Jake was ready. He wasn't sure how much time he had left, but he was going to make the most of the moments that remained. And when Keanu walked through that hospital door, everything would change. The world was about to collide with Jake's dreams, and the moment that had seemed so impossible was finally within reach. The hospital room was a flurry of activity early that morning. Nurses and doctors passed through the door every few minutes, tending to Jake's needs, adjusting his IV drip, checking his vitals, and doing everything they could to make him comfortable. But today felt different. There was an electric charge in the air, something exciting and palpable that couldn't be ignored. Sarah moved quickly, tidying up the room. She adjusted the sheets on Jake's bed and carefully placed his favorite, stuffed bear, Mr. Snuggles, on his pillow, making sure everything looked perfect. She wanted everything to be just right for the meeting. It wasn't just about Keanu coming to see her son. It was about giving Jake the one moment he had been dreaming about, the one moment that could make his world feel full again, if only for a little while. Jake, for his part, seemed to be on edge. He couldn't sit still, his mind racing with thoughts. What would Keanu be like in person? Would he look the same as he did in the movies? Would he sound the same? Jake had spent hours rehearsing in his mind what he would say when Keanu finally arrived, but now in the quiet stillness of the room, all of those words felt insignificant. "I'm so nervous, Mom," Jake said, his voice wavering as he sat up slightly, trying to hide the fear behind his eyes. "I know, sweetheart," Sarah replied gently, sitting beside him and taking his hand. "It's okay to be nervous, but just remember he's coming because he wants to meet you. He knows what an amazing person you are, and he's excited to meet you too." Jake nodded, but his thoughts were a storm of uncertainty. The thought of finally meeting the man he had admired for so long felt surreal, like he was dreaming, and he was afraid of waking up to find it was all just a fantasy. He wanted to be brave, to show Keanu that he was strong, but what if he wasn't? Before Sarah could say anything more, there was a soft knock at the door. "Are you ready, Jake?" a familiar voice called from the hallway. It was Grace, Keanu's assistant, who had been in touch with them for the past few days. Jake's heart skipped a beat. He looked at his mom, his eyes wide with disbelief. I think it's time," Sarah whispered, giving Jake a reassuring smile. "You can do this." Sarah stood up to greet Grace, who stepped inside the room with a warm smile on her face. "Keanu is almost here. He's just downstairs, and he's really excited to meet you." The excitement in the room was so thick you could almost feel it. Jake took a deep breath, his chest rising and falling with each breath, trying to calm the nervous flutter in his stomach. He could hardly believe that in just a few moments, the man who had been his hero for so long would walk through that door. Then, without warning, the door creaked open again, and in stepped someone who, despite being just a man like any other, seemed almost like a legend. There, standing in the doorway with a soft, warm smile on his face, was Keanu Reeves. For a moment, everything went silent. The world outside the room seemed to disappear. Keanu stood there, looking every bit as kind and humble as Jake had always imagined. He was dressed casually in a simple jacket and jeans, a stark contrast to the intimidating action hero persona he portrayed on screen. There was no fanfare, no camera crew, no flashing lights. Just Keanu, standing before Jake with a look of pure sincerity in his eyes. "Hey there, Jake," Keanu said gently, his voice warm and friendly. "It's an honor to meet you." Jake's breath caught in his throat. For a moment he couldn't find his words. He had dreamed of this moment for so long, but now that it was here, all the rehearsed lines, all the words he had practiced, evaporated. Instead, he just stared up at Keanu, a mixture of awe and disbelief painted on his face. Keanu took a few slow steps forward, moving towards Jake's bed. He crouched down beside it so they were eye to eye. His gaze was soft, and his smile never wavered. He extended his hand toward Jake, who hesitated for only a moment before reaching out to take it. The moment their hands touched, something clicked. It was like Jake knew right then and there that this moment was real. "I've heard a lot about you, Jake," Keanu said, his eyes full of kindness. "I know you're a fighter. You've got a lot of heart." Jake blinked, trying to process the fact that Keanu was talking to him, really talking to him. It felt surreal, almost too perfect. He felt his throat tighten, and before he knew it, a few tears began to slip down his face. "Thank you for coming," Jake whispered, his voice barely audible. Keanu gave him an understanding look, a quiet understanding that seemed to resonate deeply with Jake. "I wouldn't miss it, Jake. You mean a lot to a lot of people, and I'm just really happy we finally got to meet." There was a long pause, but it wasn't uncomfortable. Keanu didn't rush Jake. He let the silence settle, giving him time to gather his thoughts. Jake wiped away the tears that had begun to fall freely. He smiled faintly, his eyes still wide with awe. "You know, I've watched all your movies. You're my hero." Keanu chuckled softly. "I don't know about that, but I'll take it. You've got the kind of strength that makes people like me proud." The conversation flowed naturally from there. Jake told Keanu about his favorite movies, how he had loved The Matrix and how much he admired Keanu's role in John Wick. They shared laughs, stories, and even a few quiet moments where words weren't necessary. In that room, with only the two of them, Jake felt like the most important person in the world. For the first time in what felt like forever, Jake wasn't thinking about his illness. He wasn't thinking about time running out, or the doctors who had given him only a limited time left. He was just a boy talking to his hero, living in the moment. And in that moment, everything felt right. As the visit came to an end, Keanu stood up and stepped back, giving Jake a moment to catch his breath. "You're a remarkable kid, Jake," Keanu said, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for inspiring me today. I'll never forget this." Jake smiled, a genuine smile that made his entire face light up. "Thank you, Keanu. You've made my wish come true." With one final glance and a quiet nod, Keanu turned to leave. But not before he gave Jake a parting gift, a signed photo of him from The Matrix with a personal message on the back. "To Jake, the real hero. Never stop fighting." As the door closed behind Keanu, Jake's heart was full, and the world outside his hospital room felt just a little bit brighter. It was a moment he would carry with him forever. The hours that followed Keanu's visit felt like a dream. Sarah sat by Jake's side, watching as he clutched the signed photo of Keanu Reeves with both hands. It was as though the weight of the moment hadn't fully sunk in for him yet. His eyes were wide, as if he was afraid that the moment would slip away if he blinked. He turned the photo over in his hands, tracing the words Keanu had written with his fingers, as though the letters themselves held some magic. "To Jake, the real hero. Never stop fighting." Jake read it out loud to himself, the words barely making it past his lips as they settled in his heart. "I can't believe he was here, Mum," Jake said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. "He was real. He talked to me. He didn't just leave, he stayed." Sarah smiled softly, feeling tears prick at the corner of her eyes. She had never seen her son so peaceful, so full of life, even after everything he had been through. Jake had always been a fighter, but this visit, this one incredible moment, had given him a new sense of strength, something she couldn't quite put into words. "He stayed, Jake," she whispered, brushing a strand of hair from his face. "He stayed because you're special. You've always been special." Jake looked at her, his expression serious now, as if a realization had dawned on him. "I never thought I'd get a chance to meet him. I thought it was just something I'd dream about." "But he came, he really did. He came because he believes in you," Sarah said, squeezing his hand. "He believes in what you stand for, in the strength you have. You've inspired him, just like he's inspired you." Jake nodded slowly, his eyes still locked on the photo. "I feel like I've got so much more to give now, like I can fight harder." And that was the thing about heroes. They didn't have to wear capes or save the world in grand cinematic ways. Sometimes the true power of a hero was the simple, quiet act of showing up when someone needed it the most. Keanu's visit had given Jake a glimpse of that, a tangible reminder that kindness and generosity were forces that could alter the course of someone's life. Over the next few days, Jake's condition began to worsen again. The doctors had been upfront about the reality of his situation, and while the visit from Keanu had given him a new sense of hope, the inevitable couldn't be ignored. His body grew weaker, but his spirit, his soul, remained bright, brighter than it had ever been. He spent his days in and out of sleep, his mom always by his side, holding his hand, talking to him softly, reminding him of the moments they had shared together, the camping trips, the birthday parties, the times he'd laughed until his stomach hurt. She wanted him to know always that he was loved beyond words. It was during one of these quiet moments, when Jake had drifted off to sleep, that Sarah stepped outside the room for a moment. She needed some air, some space to collect her thoughts. Her emotions were raw, her heart heavy but also full of gratitude for what Jake had experienced. As she sat in the quiet hallway, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Grace, Keanu's assistant. Sarah's fingers trembled as she opened the message, unsure of what to expect. "Keanu wanted me to tell you that he's thinking of Jake. He's been so moved by your son's strength. Keanu wants to make sure that Jake knows he is not alone." Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes. She couldn't believe it. Keanu wasn't just a hero for one moment. He was staying true to the kind-hearted person she had always believed him to. And he was thinking of Jake, even after their brief meeting. The message continued. "Keanu is planning something special for Jake, a final gift, one that will be delivered personally. We hope it will mean a lot to him." Sarah's heart soared. She wiped away the tears, feeling an overwhelming sense of love and support. Keanu had already given her son a lifetime of memories in that one visit, and now he was planning something even more meaningful. It felt like a sign, a reminder that love and kindness didn't have limits and that sometimes the simplest gestures could carry the heaviest weight. That night, as Sarah sat beside Jake's bed once more, she gently brushed his hair from his forehead and whispered softly, "Keanu's thinking of you, Jake. He hasn't forgotten about you." Jake stirred slightly, his eyes flickering open. He looked up at her, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "I knew it," he whispered. "I knew he wouldn't forget." Sarah's heart broke at the tenderness in his voice. "He won't, sweetheart, and neither will I." As the days passed, Jake's condition continued to deteriorate, but the love that had surrounded him in the days following his meeting with Keanu never waned. He had been given a gift that would outlive the confines of his hospital room, a memory that would carry him beyond the physical limitations of his body. Jake's body grew weaker, but his heart grew stronger. And then, just as Sarah had been, bracing herself for the inevitable, something magical happened. The morning Jake passed away peaceful and serene, the room filled with a soft light, as though the universe itself was honoring the young boy who had never given up hope. In that moment, Sarah felt the warmth of the love that had surrounded Jake for so long. The next day, there was a knock at the door. Grace stepped inside, holding something wrapped carefully in a small box. She placed it gently into Sarah's hands. "This is for Jake," she said softly, her voice filled with quiet reverence. "Keanu wanted him to have this, forever." With trembling hands, Sarah unwrapped the box. Inside was a small silver locket. When she opened it, a picture of Jake taken from the day of their meeting was inside, along with a message from Keanu. "For Jake, the real hero. I'll always be proud of you. With love, Keanu Reeves." Sarah pressed the locket to her heart, feeling an overwhelming surge of love and loss. Jake's journey had come to an end, but his legacy, his bravery, his strength, would live on forever in the hearts of those who had been touched by him, including Keanu. Jake's final wish had been fulfilled, not just through the meeting with his hero, but through the love and kindness that had continued long after. It was a gift that would last forever. The funeral for Jake was held a week later, a bittersweet day that felt heavy with sorrow, yet filled with a quiet sense of peace. It was the kind of day that would stay with Sarah for the rest of her life, a day where she said goodbye to her son, but also celebrated the extraordinary boy he had been. The church was packed with friends, family, and strangers, people who had heard about Jake's story, people who had been moved by his courage. There were flowers everywhere, bouquets of every color imaginable, a visual tribute to the many lives Jake had touched in his short time on this earth. In the front pew, Sarah sat with her head bowed, clutching the locket from Keanu tightly in her hand. It was a strange feeling, standing there in the quiet of the church, listening to the soft hum of the organ and the gentle murmur of voices. Sarah had always imagined that she would be able to protect Jake forever, to shield him from pain and suffering. But now, as she looked around at the people who had come to honor her son, she realized that her job had never been to protect him from life. It had been to teach him how to live fully, how to fight with all his might, how to love fiercely, and most importantly, how to leave a legacy that would carry on long after he was gone. Jake's story had touched so many, not just because of his illness, but because of his resilience, his hope, and his ability to make others feel seen, heard, and loved. Even in his darkest moments, Jake had radiated light. As the ceremony began, Sarah felt an unexpected wave of calm. She wasn't alone, she would never be alone. She had been given the gift of knowing her son, of watching him grow into the person he had been, and in the hearts of those who had been touched by him, Jake's spirit would live on. At the front of the church, Sarah noticed someone enter. A man in a black suit, his face somber but filled with quiet resolve. It was Keanu. He had arrived to pay his respects. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as he made his way down the aisle, his eyes searching for her. Keanu had been part of Jake's last chapter, the hero who had inspired him and brought him a sense of hope in his final days. His presence now, at this most difficult moment, felt like a silent act of solidarity. Keanu took a seat in the back, his posture respectful, his gaze focused on the altar. He didn't draw attention to himself, but there was a sense of reverence in the way he sat, as if he too was mourning the loss of a friend. He had promised Sarah he would never forget Jake, and here he was, showing her the depth of that promise. After the ceremony, as the mourners began to file out, Keanu approached Sarah. She was surrounded by friends and family, but as soon as their eyes met, the noise of the crowd seemed to fade away. "Sarah," Keanu said softly, his voice carrying the weight of shared grief. "I want to thank you for letting me be part of Jake's journey. I'll carry him with me always." Sarah's eyes welled up again. "He loved you so much. He talked about you every day, Keanu. He never stopped telling me how much it meant to him that you came. You were his hero in every way." Keanu nodded, his eyes sincere. "And he was my hero too. You know, sometimes we don't realize the impact we have on people until it's too late. Jake showed me what it truly means to be brave. He gave me more than I could ever give him." Sarah felt the weight of his words. There had been a time when she had imagined Keanu as someone who could save Jake, someone who could change the course of his story. But in a way, Keanu had done that, not by changing Jake's fate, but by showing him what it meant to live fully, to embrace life even when it seemed uncertain, to be a beacon of hope in the darkest of times. The two stood there, for a moment, neither saying anything more but understanding everything that needed to be said. They both had lost something precious, but they also had a deep sense of gratitude for the time they had shared with Jake. He had touched their lives in ways neither of them could fully express. Months passed, but Jake's legacy lived on. His story continued to inspire everyone who had known him, everyone who had been touched by his courage and kindness. Sarah often found herself sharing Jake's story with others, telling them about the boy who had fought so hard and had found joy in the smallest of moments. She spoke of his unwavering love for Keanu, his hero, and how their meeting had been the light in his final days. The locket from Keanu was always with her. It was a constant reminder of the connection that had formed between her son and his hero, connection that transcended the boundaries of life and death. Keanu, too, seemed changed by the experience. He spoke about Jake in interviews, always mentioning how the boy had taught him the true meaning of bravery. He kept the picture of Jake in his wallet and often looked at it before going on set, a reminder of what really mattered in life. And sometimes, when the weight of fame and success felt overwhelming, Keanu would take a moment to close his eyes and think of Jake, his real hero, remembering that even in the face of the greatest trials, hope and kindness were what truly made a person great. One day, a few months after Jake's passing, Sarah received a letter in the mail. It was from Keanu. She opened it with trembling hands, and inside was a handwritten note. "Sarah, I wanted to let you know that I've set up a small scholarship in Jake's name. It will be awarded every year to a young person who shows the same courage, kindness, and strength that Jake did. I hope that in some way this helps. Carry his spirit forward, because I truly believe the world is a better place because Jake was in it. Thank you for letting me be a part of his life. With deepest respect, Keanu." Tears filled Sarah's eyes as she read the letter. She knew that Jake's legacy would live on in the hearts of those who had been touched by him. But this was a gift that would last for generations to come, a living tribute to her son's unyielding spirit. She pressed the letter to her chest, knowing that though Jake was gone, his impact would never be forgotten, and she would continue to tell his story, to honor him by living the way he had taught her to live, with hope, with love, and with the courage to face each day, no matter how hard it might seem. Jake had been the real hero, and his story, his heart, would live on forever. It had been a year since Jake had passed away, but Sarah still felt his presence in every corner of her life. The ache of his absence was a constant companion, but so too was the quiet peace that came with knowing her son had left behind something truly remarkable. His legacy continued to spread, slowly but surely, across the world. The scholarship Keanu had established in Jake's name had been awarded to the first recipient a few months ago, a young boy from a nearby town who had shown exceptional resilience in the face of his own battle with a life-threatening illness. The story of Jake's bravery had been shared with him, just as it had been shared with so many others. The scholarship wasn't just about money, it was a reminder of the strength that could be found in the most unlikely of places. It was a call to honor life, to face hardships head-on, and to never give up, no matter what. And every year another young person would be given the chance to carry on that message. But it wasn't just the scholarship that kept Jake's spirit alive. Sarah had found herself doing something she hadn't expected. She had begun speaking at hospitals, telling Jake's story to families who were going through their own battles with illness. She shared her son's journey, the way he had never once complained, how he had always found joy in the smallest of things, how he had kept his hope alive even when everything seemed to be slipping away, and every time she spoke, Sarah could feel Jake's spirit beside her. She could feel him encouraging her to keep going, just as he had done when he was alive. His story was a source of comfort for so many, and Sarah realized that in telling it, she was helping others heal. One day, as Sarah prepared for another speaking engagement, she received a call that would change everything. It was from Grace, Keanu's assistant, and her voice was full of excitement. "Sarah, Keanu wants to meet with you. He's in town for a movie premiere, and he's asked if you'd be able to join him. He has something important to discuss." A wave of disbelief washed over Sarah. She hadn't spoken to Keanu since the funeral, though they had exchanged letters and updates about the scholarship. But this was different. He wanted to meet face to face. "Of course, I'll be there." Sarah replied, her heart racing. "Is everything okay?" "Yes, everything's fine," Grace said, her tone softening. "Keanu just wants to talk to you. He's been thinking a lot about Jake, and he wants to share something with you personally." The meeting took place at a quiet cafe in the heart of the city, a place where Keanu could escape the chaos of the media and fans. Sarah arrived, her hands slightly shaking as she made her way to the table where Keanu was already sitting. He stood up as she approached, his expression warm and sincere. He gave her a small, respectful smile as she sat down, and they exchanged a brief, quiet moment before Keanu spoke. "Sarah, it's so good to see you," he said softly, his voice carrying the same depth of emotion it had when they first met. "I've been thinking a lot about Jake, about everything that happened, and I wanted to talk to you about something." Sarah nodded, her heart in her throat. "What's on your mind, Keanu?" Keanu leaned forward slightly, as though the weight of his words was heavy on him. "I've been doing a lot of reflecting over the past year," he began. "Jake changed me in ways I never expected. He taught me more about bravery and love than any role I've ever played, and I've realized that I want to do more to honor his memory. I want to do something that will last, something bigger than just the scholarship." Sarah's breath caught. "What do you mean?" Keanu paused, as if gathering his thoughts. "I want to establish a foundation in Jake's name, It would focus on helping children and families facing terminal illnesses. We'd provide financial assistance, emotional support, and resources to help make their final days as comfortable as possible. But beyond that, we'd focus on spreading the message that hope, love, and kindness can make a difference even in the darkest times. Sarah's eyes welled up as the magnitude of Keanu's words settled over her. The idea was incredible, and it was exactly what Jake would have wanted. A lasting impact that would carry his spirit far beyond the walls of their small town. "I don't even know what to say," Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. Jake would be so proud. This is exactly what he believed in, helping others, finding light even when everything seems impossible. Keanu smiled, his eyes filled with sincerity. "He was a light, Sarah. He showed me what true courage looked like. I think a foundation in his name would be the perfect way to keep that light shining." Sarah nodded, her emotions overwhelming her. She had always known that Jake's impact would continue after his death, but this was beyond what she had ever imagined. This was something that would help so many other families just like theirs, who were navigating the impossible. "We'll make it happen," Sarah said, her voice steady despite the emotions swirling inside her. "For Jake, for every child who needs a bit of hope." The foundation was established within months. It was named the Jake Hope Foundation, a tribute to the boy who had never given up, who had taught so many that even in the face of unimaginable challenges there was always hope. Keanu became an active supporter, attending events, speaking at fundraisers, and personally reaching out to families who were benefiting from the foundation's work. He worked closely with Sarah to ensure the foundation stayed true to its mission, always reminding them that it was about more than just financial aid. It was about creating a community of support where families could find comfort in each other's stories. As the foundation grew, Sarah found herself more at peace with Jake's passing. She knew that his spirit was alive in every child and family they helped, in every story shared, and in every moment of hope that flickered in the hearts of those who had been touched by Jake's legacy. A few years later, Sarah stood at the podium at the annual Jake Hope Foundation fundraiser. The crowd before her was large, more people than she had ever imagined. Everyone gathered to celebrate Jake's life and the foundation's impact. Sarah took a deep breath, her heart full. Jake wasn't just my son. He was a light in this world, a light that burned bright even when life tried to dim it. And because of all of you, that light is still shining. She looked out over the crowd, her eyes settling on the locket around her neck, the one Keanu had given to her so many years ago. The legacy of Jake, her hero, was living on in every smile, every story, every person who had been touched by his courage. "He taught us all," Sarah continued, her voice steady but filled with emotion, "that hope never dies, and as long as we carry his memory in our hearts, he will never be forgotten." The room erupted in applause, and Sarah knew in that moment that Jake's story would continue to inspire for generations to come. Because heroes never truly fade away. They live on in the hearts of those they touched, in the lives they changed, and in the legacies they leave behind. The years seemed to fly by after the foundation's establishment. Every milestone Jake had passed, every accomplishment, every victory, felt like an echo that reverberated in Sarah's heart. The Jake Hope Foundation had become an undeniable force, helping hundreds of children and families navigate their own struggles with terminal illnesses, and the ripple effects were more profound than anyone could have anticipated. Keanu, ever the quiet force in the background, remained actively involved in the foundation's day-to-day operations. While Sarah was the face, the voice, and the heart of the foundation, Keanu's quiet strength, humility, and unwavering dedication gave the organization a credibility and depth that few others could offer. To many, Keanu had always been the Hollywood icon, but to the families and children who had benefited from the foundation, he was much more, a compassionate ally, a man who used his platform to do real good. One evening, as Sarah sat in her office going through some foundation paperwork, she received a call that was, at first, almost unrecognizable. "Sarah, it's Grace. I know you're probably busy, but Keanu's been asking for you. He's got something he needs to tell you, something big." Sarah's heart raced. Keanu had always been a man of few words, especially when it came to his personal life, so hearing Grace's urgency only fueled her curiosity. "Of course," Sarah replied, already gathering her things. "I'll be there soon." When Sarah arrived at the small private room Keanu had set up in the back of the Foundation's building, she found him sitting quietly at the table, looking more serious than she had ever seen him. His face, usually so calm, was tight with emotion, and his eyes held a depth that made Sarah's heart skip a beat. "Keanu?" she asked softly, stepping inside and closing the door behind her. Keanu looked up, his expression unreadable for a moment, before he finally spoke. "Sarah, I've been thinking about something for a long time, and I don't know how to say this, but I think it's time." Sarah's brow furrowed. "Time for what?" Keanu took a deep breath, a familiar nervousness in his posture that surprised Sarah. This was Keanu Reeves, the man who had traveled the world, who had faced down the fiercest challenges in his acting career. Yet here he was, visibly nervous. "I've been thinking about my role in all of this, about Jake's legacy, and I've realized there's something more I need to do. So I've been working on something for the Foundation, a new initiative, something that could expand the work we've been doing, but I want it to be a shared decision. I want to do this with you." Sarah's curiosity heightened. "What is it, Keanu?" Keanu stood up slowly and walked to a small box on the table. He opened it, revealing a sleek silver necklace, similar to the one he had given Sarah all those years ago. This one, though, was different. It wasn't a locket, but a pendant, inscribed with the words, "Never Forgotten." "I want to build a memorial, Sarah," Keanu said, his voice quiet but full of intention. "A space for children and families to come together, a place of healing, remembrance, and hope. Something where we can honor the legacy of children like Jake who fought so hard, even when they knew the odds were stacked against them. I want it to be a sanctuary, a place where hope is not just a word, but a feeling that everyone carries with them." Sarah's breath caught in her throat as she looked at the pendant. It was a beautiful idea, one that Jake would have cherished, one that would ensure his spirit lived on in a real, tangible way. "You want to build a memorial?" Sarah whispered, her voice full of wonder. "A real place, for people to remember. Him? Remember all the children who fought like him?" Keanu nodded, his face a mask of determination. "I've been thinking about this for a long time, and I believe it's time. Jake's legacy can't just live in a scholarship or in a foundation. It needs to be a physical space where children and families can find peace, where they can remember the ones they lost, and where they can share their strength with one another." Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes as she looked at him. This wasn't just about remembering Jake. It was about honoring the countless children who had fought battles they never should have had to fight, those who hadn't made it and those who had survived stronger than anyone could imagine. It was about creating something that would never be taken for granted, something that would ensure the future generations would continue to carry Jake's message of courage, hope, and love. "I can't think of a better way to honor Jake's memory," Sarah said, her voice shaking with emotion. "It's perfect. It's everything he believed in." Keanu reached over and gently placed the pendant in Sarah's hands. "This is just the beginning, Sarah. We'll make sure Jake's legacy lives on, and we'll make sure that every family who walks through those doors knows that hope is always with them." The journey to build the memorial was long and arduous, but every step was worth it. They worked tirelessly, with Keanu and Sarah leading the charge, to create a space that would truly honor the spirit of the children who had fought so bravely and those who had lost their battles. The memorial, when it was finally completed, stood in a serene park surrounded by trees, with winding paths and benches where families could sit and reflect. In the center was a statue of a young child, an abstract figure of a little boy, hands raised to the sky, a symbol of freedom, courage, and hope. And at the base of the statue was a plaque, with Jake's name inscribed on it, alongside the words, "Never Forgotten, Forever Loved." The grand opening of the memorial brought together families, children, and supporters from all over the country. Keanu and Sarah stood side by side at the front of the crowd, looking out over the people who had gathered to honor the legacy of a boy who had changed their lives. Sarah's eyes scanned the crowd, and for the first time since Jake's death, she felt a sense of peace. Jake's spirit was alive in this place, in every stone, every tree, every breath of wind that whispered through the leaves. It wasn't just a memorial to him. It was a place where hope, love, and courage would continue to thrive. As the ribbon was cut and the crowd cheered, Keanu turned to Sarah and smiled. "This is what he would have wanted," he said softly. Sarah nodded, her heart full. Yes, this is exactly what he would have wanted. And as they stood there side by side, surrounded by love and remembrance, Sarah realized something profound. Jake had taught them all that, even in the face of unimaginable loss, life could still hold beauty. Through the tears, the pain, and the heartbreak, his legacy was a reminder that love and hope were the greatest forces of all. And so the story of Jake, the boy who had inspired a nation, who had shown them all the true meaning of bravery, lived on, not just in their memories, but in the lives of everyone who walked through the doors of the memorial, carrying his spirit with them, forever. The opening of the memorial had marked the end of one chapter in the Foundation's journey, and the beginning of another. And the Jake Hope Memorial had quickly become a haven for families who were grieving, for those who were seeking hope, and for children who had faced the impossible and still found the strength to dream. The Foundation in turn had only grown stronger, reaching more people across the country and even overseas. But for Sarah, the memorial wasn't just a physical space. It was a symbol of her son's enduring impact on the world. As she walked through its pathways, her hand gently brushing against the engraved stones that marked the names of children lost too soon, she often found herself in quiet moments of reflection. The pain of losing Jake would never fully disappear, but seeing his legacy bring comfort to others softened that ache in ways she never imagined. Keanu had continued to be her rock through it all, not just as a partner in the Foundation, but as her close friend. There was a bond between them now, one that was forged in the fires of grief and cemented by the shared desire to honor Jake's memory. They had become family in the truest sense of the word, and their work together had touched countless lives. But as much as the memorial and foundation had grown, there was one thing that still tugged at Sarah's heart, something that had always remained unsaid, something that had always lingered beneath the surface. Keanu had always been there for her, in ways both big and small, through every triumph and every sorrow. But in the quiet moments of the nights that followed Jake's death, when Sarah lay awake, her thoughts would inevitably turn to him. And it was during one of those quiet moments, long after the memorial's opening, that she realized something important. She had begun to feel a different kind of love for Keanu. It was a love born from shared grief, from mutual respect, from a deep unspoken understanding of each other's pain. It was not the kind of love that rushed in like a tidal wave. It was more subtle, growing over time, slowly taking root in the space between them. One evening, as they sat in the small office of the Foundation, working on new projects, Sarah finally decided to broach the subject that had been on her mind for so long. The tension in the room had been building for weeks, and tonight she felt an undeniable urge to speak her truth. Keanu was hunched over a notebook, scribbling down some notes. He didn't look up immediately when Sarah spoke, but his voice was calm when he did. "Sarah," he said softly, "I can tell there's something on your mind. What's going on?" Sarah took a deep breath, her heart pounding in her chest. "Keanu, I've been thinking about us, about everything we've been through together. I'm not sure what it is exactly, but I feel like we've both changed so much in the last few years, and I feel like maybe we need to talk about it." Keanu paused, his pen still in hand. He looked up slowly, meeting her gaze with the same quiet intensity that had become so familiar over the years. There was no fear in his eyes, only understanding. "I know," he said, his voice low. "I've been feeling the same way." For a moment, they both sat in silence, the weight of their shared history settling between them like a heavy cloak. Sarah could feel her heart racing, but there was a sense of calm in Keanu's presence. Whatever came next, they would face it together. "I never expected any of this," Sarah continued, her voice trembling slightly. "I never expected that after everything we've gone through, we'd be here, still standing, still trying to make a difference, but I also never expected to feel this way about you. You've always been there for me, Keanu. You've always been my strength, my safe place, and now I think I'm starting to feel something more. Something I don't know how to define, but it's real." Keanu's expression softened, and he set the pen down carefully before standing up and walking over to her. He didn't say anything right away. Instead, he simply held out his hand as if inviting her to take a step forward into the unknown. Sarah hesitated, but only for a second. She took his hand, feeling the warmth of his touch, and stood up to meet him. The world outside the office felt miles away, and in that moment it was just the two of them. "I felt the same way for a while now," Keanu said, his voice barely above a whisper. "But I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't want to overstep. I just wanted to be there for you as a friend, as someone who understood." Sarah nodded, her eyes brimming with tears. "I know. And I've been so grateful for that, Keanu. You've been more than I could ever have asked for. But maybe we don't need to hide how we feel anymore. Maybe we can take the next step together." Keanu's gaze softened even further, and he reached out to gently wipe away the tear that had escaped Sarah's eye. "We can," he said quietly. "We don't have to hide anymore." For the first time in years, Sarah felt a spark of hope that wasn't tied to the foundation or the memory of Jake, but to the future. To a future where love in all its forms had the power to heal and rebuild. Over the next few months, Sarah and Keanu allowed their relationship to evolve in its own quiet way. It wasn't a whirlwind romance. Rather, it was a slow, steady progression towards something that felt right. Their bond was rooted in a deep understanding of each other's pain, but also in the shared mission to continue Jake's legacy. They continued their work with the foundation, but now they did it as a couple, supporting each other both personally and professionally. And with every step forward, Sarah realized something profound. Healing wasn't just about honoring the past, it was about building something new. And in this new chapter, Keanu was no longer just her friend and partner. He had become the person she leaned on, the person who reminded her that even after all the heartbreak, there was still room for joy, for love, and for a future that they could build together. As they stood side by side at the annual foundation gala, surrounded by friends, family, and supporters, Sarah's heart swelled with pride. The foundation had grown beyond their wildest expectations, and Jake's legacy had touched more lives than they could ever have imagined. But now, with Keanu beside her, she knew they were ready for whatever came next. Because in this new beginning, there was not just hope for others, but hope for themselves. And so as they moved forward into the next chapter of their lives, hand in hand, they knew that the lessons they had learned, the love they had found, and the legacy they had created, together would last long after the final chapter of Jake's story had been written. In the end, it wasn't just about surviving the storm. It was about finding the strength to rebuild afterward, and to make a life that was filled with love, compassion, and a sense of purpose. And that was a story worth living. The days passed, and life moved forward for Sarah and Keanu, but the foundation's work had become their life, intertwined in ways they never imagined. The Jake Hope Foundation continued to thrive, touching lives in every corner of the country. The memorial stood tall, a testament to the love and perseverance that had always guided Sarah's journey. But the story of Jake, their son, their inspiration, wasn't one they could ever fully leave behind. It was a story they would tell, for as long as they lived, because it wasn't just Jake's story. It was the story of all the children they had met through the foundation, all the families who had walked the same painful path, all the hearts that had been touched by a young boy whose life had been too short, but whose impact was immeasurable. One crisp autumn day, Sarah and Keanu stood side by side, as they often did, overlooking the park where the memorial stood. It was a quiet moment, the kind they had come to cherish where words weren't needed. The air was filled with the hum of life, and the peaceful rustle of the leaves in the breeze felt like a gentle reminder of the peace they had found, both in the world around them and in their hearts. Keanu placed a hand on Sarah's shoulder, offering her a soft smile. It was a smile she had grown to rely on, one that always seemed to say, "We're in this together." "You know," Keanu began, his voice thoughtful, "Jake's story, it's still being written. in the work we do, in the people we help, in the kids who come here for strength and inspiration. It's not over. It never will be." Sarah nodded, her gaze fixed on the memorial, her heart swelling with pride. "I know every time I see a family come here, I feel like Jake's still with us, guiding us. I can't help but think of how much more he would have done, how much more he would have wanted to give. But I think he would have been proud of what we've done, of how his story lives on even in ways we never expected." Keanu's gaze softened as he looked at the memorial too, his hand still resting on Sarah's shoulder. "I think you're right. He would have been proud. And what we've built together, it's a legacy that will keep growing even after we're gone." A peaceful silence settled over them, and Sarah let the words sink in. For the first time in years, the weight of Jake's death didn't feel like a burden. Instead, it felt like a call to continue moving forward, a call to build on the love and strength he had shown, and to carry that message of hope, compassion, and resilience to others. They had created something bigger than themselves, a foundation of love, a symbol of hope that would outlast their lifetimes. Months turned into years, and as Sarah and Keanu continued to lead the foundation, their bond only deepened. The world changed, as it always does, but their commitment to Jake's memory, and to the children they helped, remained unwavering. New families came to the memorial, new stories were written, and each child who passed through those gates left an indelible mark on Sarah's heart. But as the years passed, there was a sense of completion in the air, a quiet satisfaction that came from knowing that the work they had started, the love they had cultivated, would carry on long after they were gone. One spring afternoon, as they were preparing for the annual gala to raise funds for the foundation, Keanu and Sarah stood together on the stage, surrounded by a crowd of familiar faces, families, volunteers, donors, and friends. The energy in the room was palpable, but it was the energy of something much greater than just a celebration. It was the energy of a shared mission, of love, and of the profound impact they had made on so many lives. Sarah took a deep breath before speaking into the microphone, her voice steady and full of emotion. "Thank you all for being here tonight," she began, her words carrying across the room. "This foundation, this memorial, this community, it's all possible because of you, because of the love you've given, the support you've shown, and the hope you've carried with you. Every child we help, every family we touch, is part of Jake's legacy." She paused, glancing at Keanu, who stood beside her, his quiet strength shining through as always. "This journey, it's not over. We will continue to honor Jake, and we will continue to help others who need us. We will carry his spirit with us, and we will keep his memory alive in everything we do." The room erupted in applause, the sound filling Sarah's heart with warmth. It wasn't just applause for the work they had done, it was applause for the message they had shared, for the community they had built, and for the love that had been the foundation of it all. As the night wore on and the gala came to a close, Sarah and Keanu stood together in the quiet, looking out over the crowd. The lights of the city sparkled in the distance, and for a moment everything felt right in the world. "You did it, Sarah," Keanu said softly, his voice full of pride. "You built something amazing. Jake would be so proud." Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of gratitude, of love, and of acceptance. "We did it, Keanu, together, and we'll keep doing it, for as long as we can." As they stood there side by side, Sarah knew that their story, Jake's story, wasn't just a chapter in the past. It was a living, breathing legacy that would continue to grow, to inspire, and to heal. And as they looked toward the future, one thing was clear: the love they had for Jake, for each other, and for the countless children they had helped, would never fade. It would live on not just in their memories, but in the hearts of everyone who had been touched by their story. In the end, that was the greatest legacy of all.